Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Welcome once again to Whiskey Congress. We have Steve in Cleveland and me in Rocky Mount, North Carolina again. Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm good.
What is your beverage for the evening?
Got the Wild Turkey Rare Breed and some New Belgium Citradelic to help lube the ball joints.
All right. Well, I'm drinking Oxford Landing Shiraz, which is not that bad actually. So this time when we're talking and I'm in North Carolina, the wine isn't coming out of a box. So I'm classing the joint up.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, last time around we didn't talk about the incident in Milwaukee with Milwaukee guard Sterling Brown, where he was tased by police, and the police report said he had been hostile and aggressive, and the video that came out after the fact does not suggest that that's true. Did you see the video? I just read the story.
Yeah, I saw the video.
And?
He wasn't. He had double parked. I mean, essentially, he did park like an asshole, and the cop approached him, and the cop really blew it out of proportion. He called for another cop because he wanted to teach Sterling Brown a lesson, and like 6 or 5 more cops end up showing up, and then they surround him, and then they're just like, all right, well, give me your ID, and it turns into this whole, it escalates. We've talked in the past about escalation and de-escalation. This could have easily been handled with a ticket. I mean, you know what? You don't like the fact that this guy in a fancy car, double parked. Then just give him.
Did he double park at a handicap spot?
Yeah, he double parked over 2 handicap spots.
I mean, that's really shitty. That doesn't mean the police should act the way.
It was 2:00 in the morning. I mean, the parking lot, was the only other car besides his that was there was the cop car. So I mean,
okay.
I get it, but I mean, if you've ever, I mean, it's not like had someone, had a handicapped or a disabled person pulled up that they wouldn't have been able to find a handicapped space to park.
Okay, so it wasn't really shitty. It was not smart, but it was not like middle of the day.
It was, he stopped, he ran in. I'm not even 100% sure he took his keys out of the car. He ran in. I think he ran in to get like gum, candy, and maybe a condom, and then he came out. I mean, it wasn't like, I mean, it was a Walgreens. Like, how long are you going to stay in a Walgreens? I mean, like, he ran in, he comes out, cop is there. Cop gives him a hard time. He's basically like, all right, man, sorry, it's late. I was just running in. And then, so the cop wants to go through this whole thing of, I'm going to teach you a lesson and blah, blah, blah. And it really gets blown out of proportion, and then kind of the last straw. And it was dumb on his part. I don't know why he said it. Like, towards the end, like, this goes on for 20 minutes, right?
Oh, really?
Because he comes out, then the cop is there, and then the cop starts, reading him the riot act, and then the cop calls for other people. So then the backup comes, and the cop goes to every other cop and says, I only wanted one. I only wanted them to send one. And they're all like, well, we were all in the area, so we showed up. You call and say you need help. We're not going to all just ignore you.
Right.
So then there was one cop who was kind of like, what the hell are we doing here, sort of. But once they all got around him and they sort of started to, drill him about his ID, then like they all went into kind of like, pack mentality, asked him to take his hands out of his pockets. He said, this is where he fucked up because he said, well, my hands are full. I think he might have said with candy or something like that. And then they immediately just dropped him.
Oh, okay. It's funny. I had heard that he double parked in a handicap spot, and I get annoyed when people who don't need handicap spots use them. I did not know it was 2 a.m. And so I was going to joke that if they tased him just because of that, I would said, okay, that's fair, but not for what happened after. But I'm now having a flashback to, do you remember, gosh, probably over a year ago, I had an incident when I was Lyft driving and I made a blatantly illegal turnaround, and a lady working for the transit authority called me out, and I attempted to imitate her badly, drawing much ire from you. Do you remember that incident?
Yeah, I do.
So it's probably not all that different, other than the person I was confronted by was a woman working for the transit authority, and I was immediately incredibly apologetic, and it was obvious what I was doing was wrong. So I'm going to get off my high horse on that, or from that angle. And again, so use of, excessive force, I think would be fair. Thank God they didn't shoot the guy.
Right. I mean, that's
a low bar.
Fortunately, we knew the result. I mean, he ended up. So they take him down. I can't remember if they arrested him, they held him, and then they let him go. And then the thing is, I don't even think he got the ticket.
I think you're correct. I know he wasn't charged with anything.
Right. I think they kind of forgot about that whole aspect of it.
Well, at that point, they probably want it to go away. They realize, oh shit, this guy's a celebrity.
He told him. He said, he's like, hey, I played for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the guy's like, I don't watch the Milwaukee Bucks. So, I think what it was, they realized, like, well, when they get him down to the station, why is he here? Because he didn't show us his hands. Okay, well, what did he do? Well, he, and half the guys there probably didn't actually know what was going on. Yeah, because if you show up, think about it. The guys,
oh sure,
you know what I mean? It's dark. It's like you probably they probably didn't even know why they were there. They were just there for backup. And then it's kind of like, all right, well, I'm not sure what we're doing here, but we'll just stand around this guy to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. And then, once the one guy moves and they tase him, then they all kind of jump on it. And I'm sure they got down to the station and they couldn't figure out why the hell he was there. And so they said, shit, we got to let him go.
And now he's saying he is going to potentially pursue legal action, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been tased. I'm sure it sucks.
I have.
You have. Okay. We haven't had Bill Squire on the show in a while. That's something you two have in common. You can share your taser stories. No, he got pepper sprayed. He didn't get tased.
I've had that too.
I know. I know that one. I didn't know the taser. So yeah. All right. So the Milwaukee police that have had their troubles in history and certainly in recent years.
Well, Jim, I really think it speaks to a bigger concern, right? Like that. You can tie this to the NFL anthem and the, what Colin Kaepernick was talking about when he kneeled, and how has all been conflated into this narrative about respecting the flag and the military. And, Colin Kaepernick initially said he was kneeling to bring attention to, people being killed by police. With impunity. And here is a situation where this could have easily, instead of grabbing tasers, they could have grabbed guns, and this could have gone south, even more south than it actually did. And that's what Colin Kaepernick is talking about. We know about this because it was Sterling Brown who plays for the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA. So how often do you think something like this happens where you have a guy who does something minor, right? Like parking over a handicap spot in the middle of the night where there's no one else in a parking lot. How often does that end up with an arrest and, trumped up charges, right? Where
sure.
Not only do they get him with the parking ticket, but then they will take that same exact scenario and say, well, he was
resisting arrest.
He resisted arrest. He was aggressive towards an officer. Whatever.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And they stack the charges against the guy, and he's already, so as soon as, and he probably doesn't have the money to deal with all this, so he's fighting an uphill battle and you have this whole idea of innocent until proven guilty, but he's essentially guilty as soon as he walks through those doors in handcuffs.
I mean, you know who I'm thinking about right now is Cleve Browder. Or Browder.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the exact same, sort of thing. He was a kid. We didn't find out his story until it was way too late. And that kid ended up killing himself because, just as a culmination of things.
So let me just say, for people who don't know who that is, he was a kid in New York City accused of stealing a backpack. They basically tried to force him through the system and get him to accept a guilty plea for a minor theft charge, and he basically said, "No, I didn't do this." So he spent, I want to say, almost 3 years in Rikers Island awaiting trial, and after 3 years of dealing with being essentially left in prison with no recourse, got into a bunch of fights with other inmates. Eventually, just basically, what's that?
I said with guards.
With guards, inmates, and just eventually, killed himself over that ordeal. And it's one of the most tragic failures of our legal system that I can think of. I mean, when I heard that story for the first time, I was just ill.
Well, and the worst part about it is that his story actually isn't uncommon. There's a lot of people like that, from Rikers to Chicago. I mean, listen, when I was in Chicago with the public defender's office, there were guys in there who, there were guys who were in county lockup for the duration of time that I was there, and that's county.
And how long were you there?
Yeah, I mean, I started there my second year of law school, and was there for another 3 years.
Holy shit!
So, right. I mean, it's like, and the thing about 26 in California, which is the Cook County Criminal Justice Center. When you look at it on a map, it's sprawling. Like, I forget how many acres it is.
You said California. Did you mean Chicago?
Yeah, 26 in California is the address.
Oh, 26th and California. Okay.
Yes, 26 in California is the address of the Cook County Criminal Justice Center. I'll never forget it. It's just ingrained in my head. But when you look at it from a sky view, it's massive, and it actually looks like a maximum security prison. Right? There's multiple cell blocks where you have to go outside to get to them. They have the towers where they're looking down, and you have armed guards in these towers with razor wire fence, which it always blows my mind when people escape out of there, but they do all the time. I was actually locked in there when an inmate escaped once, but
they went on lockdown because of someone breaking out, and you got stuck.
Yeah, with someone who had been charged with a double homicide.
Okay.
There's a story there too, but I will not put that one on the air.
Okay.
But so you look at these places and they're designed like maximum security prisons, and it's hard to say, all right, so this is county where it's supposed to be, temporary, quick, your arraignments, you're in, maybe you're there for a month, maybe you're there for a couple months, whatever, and you're out. Like, why is it built and designed with underground tunnels and these massive holding facilities, and they continue just to build and make it bigger, and all of a sudden what you realize is that that Khalid Browder story isn't uncommon. It's not rare. You have a lot of people who are being ran through. You have overzealous prosecutors who get a bug up their ass about a guy or a group or a family, and say, oh, you know what? Or you get a cop who says, you know what? I can't stand this kid. I know he's a bad seed. I may not be able to prove it, but I'll pin this breaking and entering on him, and nobody will believe him anyway. I'm the law. I'm a cop. Who's going to think I'm wrong? Who's going to think I'm lying? And that's and then they get a kid caught up, or a group of kids, or a family, or whatever, caught up in the cycle of the system, and then they won't back down off their story. You get a prosecutor who's like, well, I have to be tough as nails on crime, so my career continues to go. So they continue to push and push. The kid's family runs out of money. They don't have any sort of recourse. Some of the kids fight until they can't fight anymore, and eventually they have to accept a plea. Others fight and they get all the way to a trial, and a jury finds them guilty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, you're black, you've been in jail for this long for this particular crime. Oh, look, it looks like you've got a fight on your record in prison, so obviously you have to be a bad guy. Having no idea what it's like in these prisons, or in these jails.
Jails, yeah.
And that's how it happens. And it's not uncommon. It's not something that is rare. There's not. I don't know if there's that many police or prosecutors who will argue it anymore. Not and if they do, they can't argue it with a straight face that this doesn't happen. They may try to downplay it and minimize it, but I don't even know how effective they are at that at this point. So that's the connection between Sterling Brown and Colin Kaepernick and our criminal justice system, is that's the sort of thing people are talking about when they say the system is inherently fair, if that's the sort of thing that goes unchecked, right? We see it with these star athletes when it happens to them. We occasionally get a random act when it's caught on a cell phone, person around the area that just happens to, flip open their phone and record because that's where we are in society. But the reality is that for every one of those instances that are recorded, how many go unrecorded in every jurisdiction? And, how many times is it not even as questionable as, a guy like, I guess going back to Alton Sterling, who, was illegally selling CDs and had a gun on. That's the part that scares me, because we have no idea how many of these stories are fabricated in the officer's favor. And you have young men who have records, because once maybe they have a so-so attitude before all this goes down, but they haven't done anything yet. And then all of a sudden you get a cop that lies on you, you end up in jail, you come out, what's your attitude going to be? You catch some sort of charge where now you can't go to school. Most jobs won't hire you. People are shunning you, and you're labeled as a bad seed or a bad person or whatever. Well, what are your options at this point?
And when someone like Larry Elder or Ben Shapiro will say, racism isn't real, blah, 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 this is an example of racism. Is it technically based entirely on race? Okay, no, not technically. You could argue that it's geographical and economic, but if you look at the impact, it is so slanted towards minorities that, if you want to tell me that I'm wrong for calling it an inherent racist policy, you can tiptoe around it. But if you're being at all intellectually honest, it's an inherently racist policy.
Right. I mean, and people will go to, well, you just have to comply. And you know what? I won't argue with the fact that, listen, when you're confronted with the police, considering how the police have been shown to behave in certain instances, it's within your best interest to comply, because we've seen instances where people comply and they still end up dead, right? Like, so you're better off complying than not, because fighting no one survives the fight, right? Like,
and sometimes you don't comply. Sometimes you don't survive compliance.
But more often than not, you're not going to survive the fight. So you're better off complying with the officer and hoping that you have a chance to fight it in court. Now, with the system that's inherently racist, as we're saying, you have an uphill battle, but I'd rather have an uphill battle than no battle, because I'm dead. So first off, I'm going to tell people I'm going to comply. I'm going to do what the officer says. I'm going to try to limit the amount of time that I have to spend with that officer, not because of any other reason than it's within my best interest. Or if people are with me or my family, it's within our best interest that I do my best to not allow this to escalate further, because I have a number of things going against me based off the color of my skin and the size of my body, that an officer is not going to fight me. They're literally just going to shoot me.
All I'm hearing is you were doing 55 and a 54.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's where, that's where when people talk about the system, because the other thing people will do is they'll say, well, white people get arrested too. Yes, white people do get arrested. We're not saying that white people never get arrested. White people make up a majority of the population that is in prison. Yes, that is true.
Right.
And we're not saying that black people shouldn't be arrested and white people should be arrested. These are all factual things. All right. But what we're saying is, and if you want to say the police treat white people the same way that they treat black people, even if that's your argument, guess what? That's still not okay. Okay? Like, if you want to say that, well, black people, if Sterling Brown would have been a white basketball player or a white guy or a white woman, and all things being the same except for skin color, and he still would have got treated the same way, on the one hand, I'll say, bullshit. I call your bullshit. But on the other hand, even if that is the case, we still shouldn't accept that as common practice for our police officers.
In the land of the free.
Right. I mean, it's because essentially what you're saying, when you make that argument, it happens to white people too, then you're saying, I'm cool with it, it's fine.
Right. And the truth,
which I guarantee you, most people and there are plenty of people who will make that argument, and so they're the ones being, slammed on the ground, tased and handcuffed and shoved into a car sideways, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, this actually really sucks, and all because I disagree with the officer that I should or shouldn't get a ticket. There's shining examples of where this doesn't actually. That's not how it goes down. I wrote a story about this on our site, and I pointed out that there was an incident in New Jersey where a woman, her kids got pulled over. Woman comes, I think she was following them. She pulls over, gets out, and completely berates and dresses the officers up and down on the side of the road, and asks for and she's like threatening them and saying that she works for the city and blah blah blah, and she wants their badge numbers and everything else. Do you realize if Sterling Brown would have gone that route, that they would have skipped right over the tasers and probably shot him? If he would have yelled at these officers the way that this woman yelled at the officers she was dealing with and in their face, but they showed this woman, they let her basically get it out of her system, and then they said, all right, we'll deal with this administratively. Why? Because she's a white woman claiming to have some sort of connection to the city, so it would look really bad if they picked her up, chokeslammed her, and handcuffed her on the ground, right, in front of kids.
Right. We've seen examples of women getting manhandled and choke slammed and in the past, typically minorities. There's I want to say it happened in Texas, but there was a video we showed a long time ago where a woman came out to ask a question like, why are you doing this? And next thing she knows, she's getting hammered. And I don't like using individual incidents as evidence of a vaster issue, but there's way too many individual incidents for it not to be considered valid data.
Right. I mean, after a while, how many individual incidents do you have to say, all right, this is more than an anecdotal issue here and here.
Right.
And what people will do is they'll say, well, this one happened in Texas, and this one happened in Louisiana, and this one happened in Chicago, and this one happened in Cleveland, and this one happened, blah, blah, blah. So essentially what people are saying is that until you have a cluster of things happen in one particular area, we really shouldn't do anything about it until you go to a place like Ferguson or even Cleveland or Baltimore, and then you see, when you peel the layers back, there's actually an entire, underbelly of misconduct that's been going on for an extended period of time that ends up getting exposed, and you're like, oh, well, actually there are thousands of examples, hundreds every year of this exact thing that's been happening over and over and over again.
And this is one thing that social media and technology have brought a reality to. I mean, I think, 20 years ago, the same stuff was going on, maybe worse, maybe the same, I don't know. But, now there's unrefutable visual audio evidence, like of this sort of thing. And Sterling Brown is a good example of this, because the police report was he was confrontational, he was aggressive, they used non-lethal force. And, if not for the fact that there was video evidence disputing it, that would be the official narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, even in the case of a celebrity, the official narrative would be so-and-so did this. Why would the police officer lie? Well, here's why they would lie: because it's in their best interest to, and they know they won't get called out for it. And I hate when we do this, Steve, because I hate the people. There's whatever percentage of people listening to us are going to say you're anti-cop. I'm anti-bad behavior by the cops. I'm anti-systemic acceptance of bad behavior. When we're talking about guns and people are talking about freedom, another part of freedom is being able to live your life in a reasonable way without the reasonable risk of getting tased, shot, beaten up, thrown in jail on some bullshit thing where they need to come up with a charge to justify their actions, and you having little to no recourse.
Right.
So
and people getting arrested because they have bad attitudes or they're not nice is just ridiculous. I mean, this whole thing where, if you're, where people say, be respectful to the officer and, you need to comply and all this other shit.
True.
Nowhere is it written that I have to actually be nice to an officer, right? Like, that's actually not a part of the law. And if it is, if being nice, if I have to be nice, then we need to write that in. Like, oh, by the way, whenever you see a police officer, you have to greet them with a smile and a wave.
Right. I mean, so this is where part of the First Amendment, that is an actual First Amendment issue. Like, you as a citizen have a right to say what you're doing is bullshit, and obviously there's some limitations, but you should not be criminally prosecuted for words you use outside of the obvious exceptions. If I can transition now, because we've talked 100 times on our shows about misstating freedom of speech, and RoseAnne got her show canceled by sending out some really dumb tweets. And of course, people said, what about freedom of speech? And let me say it for the 5,000th time. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of speech without professional consequence. It means if you're RoseAnne and you tweet something that's racist and stupid, you can suffer professional consequences for it. If the police or the FBI showed up and arrested RoseAnne, I would be standing up for her vehemently. But they didn't, because they shouldn't. And
listen, the First Amendment says what? Congress shall enact no laws, right?
Right.
It goes on about freedom of the press, and then it starts with religion, then it goes on to press and speech. It's the government can't make laws saying that you can't say what you want to say. But that being said, you work in the private sector, which means you work for ABC, you work for the NFL, then those institutions can tell you what you can and can't say publicly. Right, and then they don't even have to tell you. But what they can say is, if you say something we don't like, we can fire you, because there's a contract that you sign that says, oh, by the way, we can terminate you for these laundry list of things and anything else that we see fit for any reason or for no reason at all.
Let me ask you a question just off the cuff. What is your general opinion of the RoseAnne reboot and her in general?
I think I watched an episode of the reboot.
That's more than me. And
it was okay. It was about what I expected. There was a little different aspect to it, but it's not my show. I didn't like RoseAnne when it was. My parents loved RoseAnne. I thought I hated it. It was one of those things where when it came on, my parents watched it. That's something that could get me to get up and go in my room and read comic books pretty quickly. So, I wasn't really a fan of it back in the, 80s or 90s when it was popular. And so the idea of them bringing it back was kind of like, oh, God, not this again. And, same sort of feeling. So Roseanne, she's just, I mean, she's your typical comic. I'm going to push it too far. I'm going to push it too far. And then when she pushes it too far and really offends people and really, crosses a line, then it was a joke. Or it's, now she's saying it's ambient, or it's a bad joke or it was in poor taste or whatever. I'm sorry. And it's just like, all right, well, you said I'm sorry, but, that's not, because there's a lot of people that are saying, well, she said she's sorry. Like, oh, okay, well, guess what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that she lost her job. I'm sorry that she cost every crew member their job. I'm sorry that she's costing ABC money because of, what they're losing in advertising. I'm sorry for all that. But, oh, well, she lost, like that's the consequences of not knowing when to, control your, not knowing when to shut up, essentially.
I thought ABC reacted much more quickly than I expected them to. I often find myself on the side of defending the comic, often to draw ire, often ending up drawing ire from you. But, what she tweeted was just, first of all, it was bizarre, right? So she's tweeting about, I've drawn a blank on the woman's name.
It was Valerie Jarrett, and she said, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Planet of the
Apes had a kid.
Baby.
Yeah.
I don't see, it is, this is my, like, what you haven't done is actually my opinion on what happened.
Okay.
If HBO is not going to fire Bill Maher over what he said, the house nigger comment, then it's just, at this point, what's the point of me demanding that RoseAnne get fired for this?
I completely disagree with you for two reasons. One, what Bill Maher said, while dumb, was
not funny.
Well,
and racist.
He was trying to bait. I forget that it was a senator from Nebraska whose name I want to say Ben Sessions, but that's not right. He was trying to bait a Republican senator from Nebraska into being uncomfortable. A week later, he's got Ice Cube on a show calling him out.
He was doing a monologue.
No. No, Bill Maher, when he said the house nigger thing, he was
doing a monologue.
No, he was not. 100% assure you he was not. He was in the opening segment, the one-on-one discussion, talking to that senator from Nebraska, and he said something about working in the fields, and Bill Maher responded with, "I'm a house nigger. Promise you."
Whatever.
So it was not scripted.
If you say so.
100%.
Fine. But, I think this is you defending Bill Maher because you like Bill Maher.
I think Bill Maher's an asshole. I just like his show.
Okay. Well, whatever. You've openly gushed over Bill Maher before, so I don't want to rewrite.
All right. Well, I've gone to all right. I've got I was a huge Bill Maher fan. I'm mixed about him now. I do love his show, especially when it accomplishes what I think is lacking, and that is, intelligent conversation without a filter. Personally, I like Bill Maher as a comic. I love his show. I think if I spent 20 minutes trying to have a beer with him, I would think, what a douchebag in that 20 minutes. But because he's kind of an elitist Hollywood snob. But I do like his show. I do like him as a comic. What I described is, I promise you 100% how that went down. And there's a few differences there, and I don't necessarily want to do the Bill Maher versus RoseAnne Barr breakdown. But the one thing is that her comment was directed at a person with a racist based line. Ambien is a hell of a drug. It might not be cocaine.
All right, so let me just stop you right here, because you're doing a textbook definition of whitesplaining racism to me, a black person. All right, so one, you don't get to define it for me just to justify however you feel about it. This is what happened. Bill Maher said some shit he shouldn't have said because he thought he was cooler than he was, and I think that he thinks that he should get a pass But I think part of it too is just that he's got that sort of arrogance where Bill Maher's the type of guy who loves to talk all this shit about black people, and he's got rappers on his show, but would never find himself anywhere near a community center actually helping young black kids. All right, and if he's done that, then prove me wrong, but good luck finding evidence of that. Right, like so. While Bill Maher's not a racist, and you think we should all get along, he's enough of an elitist where he doesn't actually align himself with actual black people unless they're rich and they're on his level. Right, so that's the first thing. So just because it's a different type doesn't mean it's different, right? Like racism is racism, and being an elitist, snobbish asshole that happens to do comedy and has a show on HBO, you don't get a fucking pass, right? Now, apparently Ice Cube gave him a pass and everybody else gave him a pass. Frankly, Ice Cube should have taken his bat that he used in fucking what's-his-name's office and
Brian
reclaimed Bill Maher's desk until
should have
Bill
kept your
Maher
word,
said,
Bill.
You know what? I quit. You know, I mean, that's what should have happened. And this whole thing with RoseAnne, she's the same sort of elitist, but she wants to push it the other direction. Like, that's the type of shit when people talk about whitesplaining and they talk about, you know, how you're going to explain racism to me, fuck off. Right? Because they're both assholes. They both shouldn't be on TV. But if you're going to let one, then in my opinion, she's no different or better or worse than him. So the fact that they fired her, I say it's a little bit disingenuous, and I think it was more about them, not ABC and Disney, not being a fan of the conservative of the crowd that was kind of starting to flock to ABC, and the type of pressure that it was putting on them, and they were looking for any reason to get rid of that show, and she gave them the reason that they were looking for.
And I disagree. I think they were afraid of losing money over it. And the biggest difference is HBO is a subscription service with a show on it. And no one's going to say, I'm going to stop watching HBO because of Bill Maher. People might have said, I'm going to stop watching RoseAnne on ABC. And ABC and sitcoms rely on things like lead-ins and self-promotional.
But that doesn't make sense because it was the number one rated show on TV, and they just canceled the number one rated show on TV.
On network television, yes.
And, okay, yeah, okay. But don't come on. You know exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, you see the difference between being HBO and ABC. ABC relies on advertisers.
What I'm saying, Jim, you know it was the number one rated show on network TV. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, but they're dependent on advertisers.
We're not going to argue over that point. What we're going to say is so what you're saying doesn't make sense. It was the number one rated show on network TV, and they canceled it, which means with that go all the sponsors and everything tied with it, and now you have nothing to replace that's going to garner that level of attention and viewership. So what you're saying doesn't make sense because they just cost themselves all of the money, not some of it. They just cost themselves all of it because you also lose that demographic that enjoyed that particular show, which is large enough to make it the number one show on network television. So your argument doesn't make sense.
Let me try it again. HBO does not have advertisers. ABC did.
I understand what happened with HBO. They said, I get why they didn't cancel him, right? I get that. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense because, yes, ABC has advertisers, and they could have potentially lost them. But they just lost everything that everybody was paying for. They lost the moneymaker. They got rid of it. Yeah.
And I think, well, I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Again, I liked the original RoseAnne show after it was like in syndication because I was in grad school and had 2 channels, and that was one of them that was on like back-to-back reruns. So I watched that show out of lack of options, and I think it was reasonably funny. And to deny that the people on that show had talent as actors and that the staff had talent as writers would be disingenuous because look at what their careers have been outside of that.
No, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't. I wasn't accusing you of that.
Well,
you're 10 years younger than me.
Right. I mean, I think I was like, I forget when that show.
Probably 14.
Like 12, 13, 14 years old when that show was on. at the time it just didn't grab. Like I literally, like,
I was not saying you said that. I'm just saying that.
And listen, RoseAnne has a certain level of talent. John Goodman has been around for forever. The kids. I know the girl who was the executive producer of the show, with the black hair, Sarah. Or
right,
whatever.
Sarah. Yeah, I know who you mean. So does everyone else. Black hair.
She's been writing for a long time and producing for other stuff. Like I'm not saying that they weren't talented. And my argument is that the show probably I wouldn't have canceled. I wouldn't have canceled it because it's not like this. This wasn't even new. And this isn't even the first time she said anything like this. Back in 2013, she said about Susan Rice, who is also another light-skinned black woman, that she had big old orangutan balls, right? Like she was some sort of a monkey with orangutan balls. Like, come on, like this is who RoseAnne is. You've known who she was. Like the tweets, they've been there. So if you do any sort of vetting of your actors and actresses, which I'm sure ABC does, they knew exactly who and what she was. So this, to me, feels disingenuous.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, if there's an organization that does more to control their image than Disney, which owns ABC, I don't know what it is.
There's not. ABC and Disney, they which is part of their problem, is that they spend so much time trying to manufacture images beyond what anyone else does that it's really starting to hurt them and impact their brand. I mean, I think to a certain degree it's hurting them on ESPN. They don't know what they want to do. They went super liberal. They got rid of anyone who had a conservative voice, whether it was Kurt Schilling or
Cowherd.
Yeah, Cowherd and all that stuff. Even though those people chose to leave, and then Britt McHenry or whoever the annoying one was, and all that other stuff. And then now they're trying to come back with Will Kane and a few other people who have conservative voices. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a Stacey Dash or somebody like that on ESPN for no good reason, because they're constantly trying to manipulate their image and figure out where they're going to be instead of just putting out good content, right? Just find funny shows, But now, their lineup. The one night is a show called Blackish, another show called Straight Off the Boat, and then they had RoseAnne. So it was just a multicultural.
Pretty diverse.
Well, it is, but at the same time, you can tell it's just like we don't know what we're doing. We're just, and maybe that's a bad example because it's so diverse. It just I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't have ended the show over that.
I wouldn't have either. Now, again,
I would have just made her apologize and came out and said, this is terrible and blah, blah, blah. I might have, fined her and told her, like, listen, while you're working on this show, you need to tone it down, and while they're trying to censor me, it's just like, all right, well now, but this is what I would have done. I said, listen, One, you're going to apologize publicly, right? You're going to make it as sincere as your fat ass can. And then we're going to fine you a lot of money, right? You can tell people or you don't have to. Either way, we're taking it, right? Matter of fact, you're just not getting it. Okay? Then you need to tone it the fuck down, right? And if you got a problem with it, then you can walk. And I'll go as far as what I would do, and this is a classic mistake by TV networks all the time, I would let her walk, and out of spite, I would hire somebody else and bring him in. You know what I do? I go find Paula Deen's chubby butt and tell her to bring her stick of butter in here and replace her with Paula Deen.
I mean, so you would have basically 2.5 men it.
Yep.
Okay. I think that makes a ton of sense.
And then just and wrote it out for a little bit longer, at least for another season. And then if it crashes, it crashes. Or who knows, maybe you strike fire just like they did with the Fresh Prince.
Okay. I mean,
when they got rid of when Dark Aunt Viv left because she was a diva and wanted more money, allegedly, supposedly, and they brought in the light skinned Aunt Viv, and the show did just fine without dark skinned Aunt Viv. Obviously, RoseAnne is a much bigger part of the show, but I think there's an argument that there's some people who can make there's some shows have been able to replace people, just flat out replace them right? Like, not kill the character off or do anything else. They just said, all right, fine. You want to be an asshole? We'll just replace you. So I think that would have been the ultimate shot in her gut.
It is tough, though. She is the title character, right? So in 2.5 Men, you can replace Charlie Sheen, who clearly was the biggest draw on the show, but it wasn't the Charlie Sheen and another guy and a half. Whereas with RoseAnne,
right.
that's
it
her name.
Would have been tough. I'm not saying.
I know.
I'm not saying it was going to be easy, and I'm not saying it was even the best thing to do. It's just what I would have done because I can sometimes.
I think you're right. I think I would have waited because when it comes from an ABC perspective, I'm 100% comfortable saying it is purely a financial decision by them. They're looking at the numbers, they're looking at the risks, and they're running for cover. You can disagree with me on the logic of that, but I don't think it was a moral high ground thing by ABC and Disney. I think it was purely, where's the money going to, what's the bottom line on this? And they ran. I'll be curious to see if someone else picks the show up. I frankly don't care, to be honest with you. I'm just curious. And I've talked about RoseAnne more now than I have in the entirety of my life combined, including the 12 years it ran on television. So I'm happy to stop unless you got more to say.
No, I mean, the deal in terms of picking it up, everyone keeps saying Fox is the logical choice. And it'll be really interesting to see if Fox makes that move. I feel like they're not going to, but hard to say.
And some of this, I mean, they had Wanda Sykes was one of their writers, and Wanda Sykes leaving was one of the big, snowball effect things that led to this all being taken care of so quickly. And
I think, and from what I read, she wasn't the only one.
I don't think she was, but I'm just saying she's a big name. Wanda Sykes is a fantastic comic, and she's been a writer on so many things. She's kind of an under the radar person in a lot of ways. And when she said "fuck it," and my guess is that with someone like her, who is not a thin-skinned person from, based on her comedy and her career, my guess is she had other reasons to be pissed off, and this was the final straw. And so even if someone else like Fox did want to pick it up, how much of their staff would be behind them and join them? Because maybe not. I don't know.
I agree. We're on the same page there for sure.
All right, let's talk about my buddy Jeff Sessions.
You love you some Jeffrey Beauregard.
You know how much I love Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions. All right, so Trump came out and basically said if I had to do it again, he wouldn't be the Attorney General, which, as you know, the day that Jeff Sessions...
He came out and said, I wish I had picked another Attorney
General. It's funny. So I was just using the word thick-skinned. Jeff Sessions apparently is thick-skinned because Trump has been doing things that seem like they want to push him out pretty much since the beginning of the administration. Now, there have been stories that he offered to resign and that offer was not accepted.
Which I don't know if I
buy. I don't know either.
That could be just people putting it out there just to, deal with the firestorm that is Donald Trump. But I agree with you. Jeff Sessions' ability. I mean, I just think at this point, so you just don't have any sort of ego, pride. You're just going to let this guy shit talk you nonstop to the world? I mean, it's not like he's saying it to a few people in our neighborhood or, just some people at the office. I mean, he's saying this to the world that you're, that you're weak and you're a pushover and he doesn't like you and he shouldn't have hired you. I mean, I get it. They're just words, but I mean, that shit matters. And I think that I would get to a point where I would say, you know what? You problem solved. You go have Rudy Giuliani do my job and royally fuck this up. See you later. I'm going on a vacation.
And I'm gonna write a book and I'm gonna make a bunch of money and fuck off. I wonder if there are things in the whole campaign mess that make Trump afraid to flat out fire him. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to conspiracy theory this, but yeah, I agree with you. If I mean, in my current situation, if my boss walked around the office and said, "Jim's a loser. He's he doesn't have the guts to stand behind any of his technical decisions. I can't believe this guy is allowed to." One thing I do all the time because I work in a trailer area full of women is I restock the water cooler all the time, and I'm happy to do it. But if my boss went and said, if it weren't for the fact that this idiot could pick up a 5-gallon water bottle, we wouldn't have him here, I would be like, you know what? Find an 18-year-old to pick up the water bottle, I'm out. And essentially that's what Trump has done to Jeff Sessions, and he's still around. And I think it's because he's got his dream job.
I mean, he's essentially, made him almost like a cuckold or some shit. It's weird. But I have stood by the idea that, like what you said, it's Jeff Sessions' dream job. He has his agenda that he's implementing. And it's kind of like a Hail Hydra thing from, Marvel Comics where Hydra was the bad guy infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. and the other good guys. But, Jeff Sessions has his ability to implement the agenda that he wants implemented in the Department of Justice, peeling back all this stuff with, that we're talking about in terms of systemic racism and police misconduct,
marijuana,
and he's losing on the marijuana front. I think that in the next 18 months probably has a pretty drastic shift based on, just some of the things that what we saw out of Schumer. We'll see where that goes. But, looking at some of what he wants to do with, like some of the things that have already been sort of put on the table in terms of how people are treated if they, assault an officer and just, looking, there's just a number of different things that I think that he wants to see put in place in terms of making things harder on quote unquote criminals of certain backgrounds, and making things easier on police, which in theory sounds good. We want things to be hard on criminals, and we want the police to be able to identify those criminals much easier. But when it has a disproportionate impact on a certain particular group of people, and there's a higher percentage of those people that are wrongly convicted, or later to be found innocent, or end up shown to be abused through the course of the system, then there's some concerns there, and I think that's the danger of Jeff Sessions, because I think he's blinded by just the words law and order. I think he's just completely blinded by them.
I think he sees the good old days as 1955 Montgomery, Alabama, and maybe from his perspective, those were the good old days. But unfortunately, from that perspective, you're neglecting basically anyone who is a minority, a female, and not in your protected class.
My grandmothers disagree with your idea of the good old days, Jeffrey.
Oh, so I thought you were putting that on me for a second. I'm like, okay, let's not do that. So what's funny is the one person that apparently is getting the president's ear when it comes to law and order reform is Kim Kardashian.
Jim, I saw this today, and my head almost exploded. Right, like she was granted access to the White House to speak with Jared Kushner about prison reform, because she's a friend or a parent of a friend serving a 20-year term for a non-violent drug offense. And I think that's important. Now, on the one hand, let me say this. Let me say a couple things. First of all, with Kim Kardashian, I'm not necessarily a Kardashian hater, right? I've grown tired of them. I've got Kardashian.
Great ass.
I used to have a crush on Kim Kardashian, and then, I just saw some pictures and things where it's just like, yep, butt's definitely fake, and everything else is kind of put together poorly around it. And so Photoshop and airbrushing is an amazing thing. So, that aspect has sort of died down. But what I will say is, listen, while Kim Kardashian is not the person that I would choose to have this conversation with Jared Kushner or Donald Trump or whoever she was able to speak to, at least somebody is having that conversation with them. And that's important. Right now, you only hope that she can articulate it in a way that is beneficial and that sinks in and that stays with them. And listen, that's the hope for anyone. Like, just because you send some professor or law enforcement agent or an attorney to have this same conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean that one of those people is going to get through to whoever they talk to in the administration better than Kim Kardashian. Maybe she's the perfect person to send. Maybe she can say, listen, this is my experience. This is why it's bad. Look at my boobs and let's get this fixed. I don't know.
So let me say something that is a little out of character for me, because I've been a Kardashian basher for years, just because I'm just not a fan of what they represent in terms of famous for being famous and whatever. She's a smart person. I mean, how she got famous, I've seen the video, whatever. But she is an intelligent human being who the presidency is currently occupied by a guy whose last job was reality TV show host. She's a better one of those than he was. Maybe she can get some stuff said. Now, I mean, I have very early on in the Trump administration, I had hopes that Jared Kushner was going to be the, undercover good guy. I've lost that faith. I don't feel like he's effectual at all. I mean, when Trump said he was going to solve the problems in the Middle East, I thought, yeah, that's a bit of a heavy mantle to hang on a kid, but whatever. But what was funny to me was I saw that I got the message from you. Kim Kardashian granted an audience to the White House to discuss prison reform, followed by a message from you that said, "I am done with the internet for today." Which
Jim, I had to quit it. I'm just like, all right, well, I'm done.
I'm not saying you made a bad choice. I saw that and followed by "I'm done for the day," and I thought, what the fuck? And what's funny is that, so before that, you had messaged me about Brian Colangelo and about a televangelist, and I did not know anything about either of those stories until you messaged me. So where do you want to go first? Because they're both crazy stories.
So I guess we'll start with the televangelist who says that God told him he needs a fourth private jet. And the reason why is he needs a jet that can go anywhere without having to stop, so that he can spread the word of God. He can spread the gospel without having to stop for fuel, because he owns a fuel farm. So if you own a fuel farm, then it's dumb to have to stop somewhere else to get fuel. So he needs a jet that can maximize, that God-given benefit of having a fuel farm. so that he could spread the word of God. Now, he is been noted as being a pastor who preaches the word of God and prosperity. And it's amazing. I wish that we had the setup so I could do the audio, because at one point in time, he asked the question. He says, now people will look at my jets and they'll say, can't you take that one? And he's just like, yes, I can. But this one is better. And this is why. Because the Lord told me why. It's amazing, right? I mean, by the end of it, you feel very skeevy. You don't feel comfortable at all. You do not want to give this guy money, but you do feel as though you understand how he can suck in stupid people.
Yeah, so I did not get to see the speech. This is where our age comes in to play a big difference, because it was probably like 1987 or 88. And yes, I know I was 17 and you were 7. Oral Roberts, and he's got a university named after him in Oklahoma, did a fundraiser where he said, if I don't raise, I forget the amount of money. Let's say it was $50 million. I don't remember what it was. He said, if I don't raise $50 million, God will kill me. He actually said that basically, if you as my congregation don't raise this money, God will remove me from this earth. And Saturday Night Live did a great skit where they had Oral Roberts as a guy who owed the mob money and God as the mobster. Like, did you get the money? Yes. Where did it come from? Well, $50 came from Mrs. Smith in Tulsa and $4.5 million came from, but Oral Roberts actually said, I will die if you don't do this. I don't know which one is more ballsy.
This one is pretty ballsy.
It's really ballsy.
He says that God, like, I think I'm gonna have to play this, and we're gonna have to like
splice it in.
Old school. No. I'll play it for you.
All right.
I think the sound should be okay. Jim, you have to hear it.
All right, bring it. You have it. You have it handy, or do we need to pause?
Wait, hold on. I did have it handy, but the video. Oh, the fucker took it down.
Okay, so we can't get.
I couldn't get the actual video has been pulled down. And
I wonder why.
Yeah. I mean, it's spread. I mean, all you can find online now are just crappy news commentators and people with podcasts making comments on it. So
don't you hate those smarky podcast assholes who think they know everything?
Right. So, but I mean, I like if you can find it, like to listen to this guy explain to you how God explained to him he wanted him to have a Falcon 7X. I mean, it's a $54 million plane new. You could buy one used for $20 million. So there's that.
But would God want you to have a $20 million used plane when you really deserve a $54 million new one? And
apparently not. I mean, it's amazing. And earlier when this came up, and I was at work, I quickly kind of looked. I mean, because listen, I don't know the world of private jets. I mean, considering the cheapest private jet that I saw that I would want. Now maybe that's part of the problem.
I have flown in the cockpit of a private jet before.
But you were flying it, which means that that's basically like you're a servant. Like
I was. Well, no, I was. I was.
You're among the servant class. Like I'm talking about. I was
also in the cabin once. The company I worked for in Orlando, the owner of that company had a private jet. I think it had 6 seats plus the pilot, co-pilot. I sat in the co-pilot seat once and in the cabin a few times. And this guy was hilarious because he was, he bought a pharmacy in Reno, Nevada, and a pharmacy in Vail, Colorado, so he could go gambling and skiing and write them off as business trips. And yet he was amongst the most miserable people you'd ever meet because he had this Cessna jet and the guys he was hobnobbing with had redone 737s. So he went from being the big boss to the smaller fish in a huge pond, and he was the most jealous, bitter son of a bitch you'd ever meet. And
well, that to what I was trying to say is that looking at the Jets, the 10 million is where you need to be to get comfortable in my mind. In the world of private
so
jets.
you and this guy would have fit in very well together.
Yeah, I mean, like if I don't have an extra 10 million to spend on a private jet, then I'll just do chartered flights, where you call them up and say, hey, I got to be here and here, and then you pay a little bit more, and it's $15,000 flight for you and whoever you're taking. But I'd rather do that and at least ride the way that I want to ride, as opposed to having like only a 6-seat private jet. It's stupid. I need like 12 seats.
You've thought this out more than I have.
I did. Like when I started looking at them, I was just like, oh, I really need to pick it up here. Because in order to afford a $10 million private jet, I think you probably need to be worth $100 million, right?
The guy that I worked for back in those days was probably worth every bit of that. I don't know if he fully owned the jet. I mean, that's how it got presented to us. I truly don't know. I just know that he had a private pilot.
Here's the thing. They're so like if you think about the cost of owning a boat, right? You think that
I've owned a boat.
Well, I know, but a nice boat, right? Like not quite a yacht, but
okay,
a 30-foot boat with a couple.
My boat cost $5,000 all in. So
right, like I mean, a couple levels and a little kitchenette, a bathroom mat, a couple places to sleep, and watch TV and the whole thing, and you got all sorts of this and that up top. But let's say you buy a boat for $30,000, and then just here in Cleveland, you wanna dock that boat in Lake Erie for 4 or 5 months out of the year. That's $5,000 a year, and then you have to store it, which can be another $5,000 per year. Not to mention gas, which it costs about $500 to fill up a boat. If you want to get to Put in Bay, which is about
50 miles.
What's that?
About 50 miles.
Yeah, 50 miles
or by lake.
Yeah, by nautical whatever.
Right.
And and then you got to make sure you got enough gas to come back, and then whatever sort of repairs you have to do and cleaning the boat and all that other stuff. So the point is that when you start to add that up for just a boat, right, you're talking multiple thousands of dollars a year, right? Well, extrapolate that out for a plane, right? Like, what's the cost of fuel for a plane? Like, if I want to fly from Cleveland to Vegas, what's the cost of fuel? I have to pay a pilot. Not do I just pay the pilot? Like, I'm sure I have to pay him some sort of per diem if I'm going to Vegas for 3 days or whatever it might be. And then what are the storage fees for something like that? Where do or do you have to go out and buy something to store it in? Do you go buy a hangar or rent a hangar space and all the other maintenance that goes with it? So not only is it the initial $10 million price, but it's the maintenance and everything that goes with it. I'm sure that's a few $100,000 a year to just own a private jet. So, I mean, like if you just hit the lottery, even if you hit the Powerball, I wouldn't suggest buying a private jet.
Well, thank you for financial planning for Powerball winners on Whiskey Congress.
You're welcome.
All right.
That's also good advice. In case I hit the Powerball, please remind me of this conversation.
I will definitely do that
because there's a good chance I may make
I'll be
straight to wherever the fuck you buy a private jet, like in person, because I'm not doing it online. You're gonna have to stop me from going.
So in other words, I have to try to Mark Kelso tackle Christian Okoye. That's a really obscure reference for people who aren't my age, but right. Mark Kelso was about 170 pounds. Christian Okoye was 260 and 5% body fat. So for me to stop you from this mistake, I have to use that tactic to take you down.
Right.
Challenge accepted, provided you win the Powerball.
If I were you, I would try to distract me with something else.
I think I know how to distract you.
I would distract me with something else.
I'm going with strippers.
Well,
once you won the Powerball, that might not work.
You may need more than strippers once I get to the Powerball level.
All right, let's move on, because you've brought one other story to my attention today that I knew nothing about, and I happened to learn about it while I was working out at the hotel gym today, and it's hilarious to me. That is Brian Colangelo of the Philadelphia 76ers.
So Brian Colangelo is, I mean, he's basketball guy, right? And his position with the team requires him to have the trust of the staff, of the players, owners, ownership, management, the whole team, right? Like, he's got to manage almost every aspect of the team to one degree or another. And the story is that he had multiple, like, burner Twitter accounts, like these fake accounts, where he would prop himself up, he would criticize players, he would criticize people that criticized him. He did that stuff, but he also divulged, like, private, unknown health information about a player. And then he may have divulged, like, some information about a trade that the team was about to pull off that, had anyone been paying closer attention, may have been able to use it as a way to kind of figure out what the Philadelphia 76ers were doing, and maybe he would have been able to counter it or stop it in some way, shape, or form. So he's divulging trade secrets, essentially, through these, burner Twitter accounts. And I think one of the funniest things that came out of it was people were making fun of him. I guess he wears, like, some pretty big collars on his shirts.
I didn't know. Okay.
And he, like, jumped in and defended. That's a normal size for a collar. Move on.
No. Come on.
Yeah, he did. You have to read it. It was on. I forget the guys who oh my God.
And another thing, that would be like Trump having a fake account going, that's where a tie should be tied to.
Right, exactly. Like, right? Like he's listening.
Your tie should go to your nutsack.
It's no, it shouldn't. It's theringer.com. Theringer.com has this article, and I mean, it's just, when you read it, I mean, if you know anything about sports and how it's supposed to work in terms of trust and, how your upper level office management are supposed to work, this is just really riveting stuff. And I've got friends from Philly, like we've got Dave from Philly, who has
huge Sixers fan.
Right, he's a big Sixers fan. He provided us beer last week. I've got my buddies that I went to college with that are from. They went to Central Bucks West, that high school out there. So they're big Philadelphia fans, and they've been giving me a hard time about LeBron coming to Philly. And then I saw that story today, and I sent them a text like, "Well, you can go ahead and pull yourself out of the running. Enjoy your dumpster fuckface fire."
All right. So I thought about that, and part of me says you're right if Colangelo is still around, but if they can his ass because of this, and
LeBron ain't going there. No way.
All right, so let's talk about this for a minute, because I got asked about this today, yesterday. My coworkers and I do our bar trivia thing out here in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and someone saw me wearing something Clevelandish and said, "Where do you think LeBron is next year?" And I said, "I think he stays in Cleveland." And they said, "What about Philly?" I don't see it. Not saying Philly doesn't have the talent. I just think LeBron is a guy who has his legacy as his, at this point, he's accomplished so fucking much. His legacy is huge. And to go to Philly doesn't strike me as the move, because, I mean, they're a good team, and with him, they become the odds-on favorite to win the East. And maybe the best challenge to Golden State. But I don't know if he wants to be that hired gun guy. What are your thoughts?
I think that's what Cleveland fan wants to believe. I think Cleveland fan and I am a Cleveland fan, but stepping out of body and looking at it, Cleveland fan wants to look at the letter that LeBron wrote back in 2014 or whatever it was, or 15, and
14, yeah,
and say, I think they want to look at that and say, well, based off of that letter, LeBron is going to retire in Cleveland. He had his time away. You know, he whether you want to look at it as college or you want to look at it as his military service or whatever, he went off. He learned how to become a man. He learned how to win, and now he's back in Cleveland because Cleveland is family. Cleveland is home. You know, nothing is given, everything is earned. Nice letter. He won us a championship, and so because of that, he's a man of his word. His legacy is what matters, is what prevails, and so he will stay because his wife wants to be here. He wants his kids to go to St. V's where he played. He wants to play at least a year in the league when his son is in the league, and then he wants to be able to ride off in the sunset and have some say in how his statue looks when we put it up here in Cleveland. That's what Cleveland fan wants to believe, and there may be some truth to that. But in reality, LeBron James is chasing the ghost of Michael Jordan. He says he's not. He says that he's looking for something bigger along the lines of Ali in terms of greatness and social impact, and I believe that. But from a basketball standpoint, he wants to win. And legacy be damned, it's about championships. And he may be looking at it and saying, okay, can I win another championship in Cleveland? Now, the problem is this year, what we're seeing right now, the fact that with this team of flaky Kevin Love, inconsistent J.R. Smith, a young, inexperienced Larry Nance Jr., and a couple other guys, and a George Hill who stepped up and has become very, very beneficial to us. And then, a Kyle Korver who's probably on his last leg, on his last run, dealing with some of the tragedy that he's had to deal with in his life. I doubt we'll see him back next year. I think what we're looking at, like when you look at it, LeBron's looking at this team right now saying, I can't believe we made it. And no matter how it all ends, I think he's going to sit back and say, how much do we have to improve this team to actually be legitimately competitive? Because next year, Kyrie Irving comes back and Hayward comes back. And all of a sudden, the Boston Celtics have two bona fide superstars that we know of, and then everything that blossomed and developed over the course of this season without
on a team that took the Cavs to 7 games.
What's that?
The Celtics have those two studs added to a team that took the Cavs to 7 games.
7 games, exactly. So I think LeBron looks at that and says, in order to get out of the East, I have to beat Kyrie, Hayward, and all these other guys that have developed over the last year. And oh, by the way, Philly looks pretty damn good with Joel Embiid and company. And so we were fortunate this year we didn't have to play Philly, and Kyrie and Hayward were out, and we got pushed to the brink by the Pacers, and
and the Celtics.
And then we had an exhibition round in the second round. But how do I get us in a position to, one, get out of the East, and then deal with what I see in the West? And so, I guess from a basketball perspective, could it work in Philadelphia? Yeah, it could. Now, the problem is that you're going to have to move some pieces around to make that work. And I'm not 100% sure how it works with LeBron and Ben Simmons. But I'm sure it does. You can figure it out. and I don't know that Philly team well enough to really to dig into it, but I guess my concern is, ball movement and how it moves and how it flows. But I mean, it could work. So I think in reality, I guess I'm at a point where if LeBron walks, I'm not surprised at the end of this year. I'm not. I think he'll sign another 1-year deal or whatever. I think he'll be back next year, and then after that, I think we'll be in the same position again. But if he were to say he's going to Philly or LA, I would not be surprised. I really wouldn't, and I don't think I would be all. I would be disappointed, but I think it would just be like well, hey, we got 4 straight title runs and a title out of it, which is better than any other team in Cleveland can say. So I'll take it.
I've said before to you, I don't know if I've said it on Whiskey Congress, but I was a LeBron fan. When he left, I was a hater. I loved how he came back, and I said the way he left was shitty. The way he came back was absolute perfection. I will say that if he chooses to walk and pursue the next best thing, I will just tip my hat and say thank you for the title, because the night that we won that championship was one of the most fun nights I've had as a sports fan. And I'm not a native Clevelander or even a native Ohioan. And it was one of the most fun nights I have had as a sports fan in my life. I walked home from my friend's place in Rocky River to my place then in Lakewood, which if you're not from Cleveland, that means nothing to you. It's probably about a 2.5 mile walk. I probably got, what's that?
I said it's a little bit of a hike.
It was a 2.5 mile walk. I did stop in 2 different bars and run into friends. The walk took probably 3 hours. I probably got hugged 100 times and high-fived 250 times. The streets were full of people celebrating. There was nothing scary about being on the streets. It was just so much positive, fun energy that all I can say is, if not for LeBron, that wouldn't have happened. If he wants to take a shot with another city, thank you for what you did. You screwed up. You fixed it better than anyone could have ever asked. Thank you and good luck. But having said that, I'm not giving up on the NBA Finals. So let's talk about that real quick, because they begin this weekend, actually tomorrow night. Vegas odds are severely against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yes, sir.
I understand why. I don't want to say let's predict, because if either of us predicted Cavs, we would be called homers, and rightfully so. So let's say, what does it take for the Cavs to win the series? I've got thoughts on it. I'll throw it to you, or I'll go first. Your choice.
You can go first. I've talked a lot today.
For me, the Cavs to have a chance in the series, 2 of their bit players need to step up and change things. Larry Nance Jr. to me is the guy that I have the most hope for, because he is so fucking athletic. It's crazy. I mean, that kid can get up off the ground and throw it down like nobody's business. And even though Tristan Thompson I wouldn't call a bit player, he's a big physical experienced guy. He needs to step up and be a defensive presence in the middle. That, and all right, I'm going to throw a third. And one of 3 people, Kevin Love, JR, or Corver, needs to get hot on any given night and stroke some threes, and we can win 4 out of 7.
Yeah, so I agree with almost all of that.
That was kind of a thank you, Captain Obvious, I know,
but I mean, really, it comes down to defense. They have to play just very aggressive, fast defense. They've got to move. They've got to switch. They've got to know where their guy and 2 other guys are, and where they're gonna be. They cannot allow uncontested threes, and they also have to weather the storm. And what I mean by that is, at some point in time in the second quarter or the third quarter, Golden State is going to light up. Right? They're just going to, for whatever reason, there's going to be a 4-minute run where they won't miss. And you have to weather that storm, and you have to continue to get in front of those guys, contest the shots, move towards them, don't foul when they're at the three-point line, and frustrate them. I think Jeff Green is going to be critical because Jeff Green is going to need to guard Kevin Durant for an extended period of time. That responsibility will fall to LeBron in certain situations, but Jeff Green is going to be the guy who really is in front of Kevin Durant a majority of the time. And Jeff Green is the type of guy who gives Durant fits. And Durant will cave if pressure is put upon it, right? A game at Christmas time, late in the fourth quarter, he's good for a game-ending shot. But what we just saw in the last series, what we've seen out of Durant in the past at Oklahoma City, what we've also seen out of Golden State as a whole is that in these playoff situations where it's, where you have to win and it's crunch time and it's less than 5 minutes and the other team is putting the pressure on, right? Playing tough defense and they're making shots and they're getting to the basket and they're getting fouls. That's when Golden State, they're not used to it. They win their games by 10, 20 points. They're not used to playing like this late in games. So if you can make it like that, a scrappy game at the end of the game where you got to show who's got the bigger heart, who's got the bigger nuts, who's got the bigger clit for the ladies, whatever, then that's when you see Kevin Durant not make shots. That's when you see Draymond Green dribble off his leg. That's when you see Steph Curry throw balls out of bounds and miss shots. That's when you see Klay Thompson with that look on his face like someone just shit in his mouth. That's when you see these guys fold and buckle. So it will come down to defense. And because if you play defense and you keep it close, then you have you
tighten the clamps at the end and make them deal with what they're not comfortable with.
If you're within 6 points with 5 minutes to go, your chances of winning are exponentially higher than any other scenario out there. Obviously, unless you're ahead or whatever, but if you're within 6 and you really start to put the pressure on and you get a stop and you get a score and you bring it down to 4 or 3, then you pull that off and you may have just won the game because they'll fold. They won't go back down to the other end and go, Splash Brothers. They'll go back to the other end and go tight asshole brothers, right? They'll all, all their sphincters will tighten up, and we'll see them cave. We saw it in 2016 in Game 7. We saw it the other night against Houston.
If Houston didn't completely fold from 3-point land, we're talking about Cavs and Rockets.
Right, but Houston played a game where they got out. They got out early, but they didn't weather the storm in the third quarter, and then they allowed the Golden State Warriors to build a lead, and they didn't put the pressure on them late, and Golden State wins by 9. And so it's just like they never were able to get it close enough where they could really close the gap. So that's what you really have to pressure those guys and get in their head and let them know that you don't care about anything. Like, I think you're really nice, but you're not going to make this shot. Or I think you guys are all handsome young fellas, but at the end of the day, you don't have the intestinal or the testicular fortitude that it takes to make that shot. Whatever it is, whatever sweet nothings you have to whisper into their ear to get in their head, you have to be close enough to do that. But if you are, and you can, and you do, then they cave.
So you're doing Rocky Balboa and Rocky 3. Ain't so bad. Yeah, I might be crazy, but I'm not breathing heavy.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for letting me get away with that.
It's my favorite Rocky. So
I still don't know how.
Because it's the best one.
It's not. It's not.
Okay.
One is the best one.
Okay.
All right. Do we want to even try to do a come at me, bro? I really
I would like. I have one. I actually have it written down.
All right, bring it.
Okay, so it was before the week kind of played out the way it did.
All right.
We didn't even talk about Trump's campaign rally in Tennessee and the whole MS-13 thing, where now his big thing is where he tells Democrats that all Democrats love MS-13 because of the way the media and the Democrats completely fucked that whole thing up. But my come at me, bro, is this. If you take away the distractions of Donald Trump, right, just the tweeting, the rallies, and you just look at policy, would you be able to say he's doing a good job? Or, I guess a better way to put it is, since it's come at me, if you took away his policies, you would be able to say he's doing a good job.
If you took away his rhetoric, you mean?
You took away his rhetoric, you took away the distractions, and just look strictly at the policies to this point, you'd be able to say, you know what? He's doing a good job. Now, I know immediately what you're going to go to say, you're going to shit yourself, and it's the EPA and it's deconstructing of that agency, but it's a part of it, so go.
You know, all right, so you're right. On environmental issues, I have a huge problem with what he's done. Mike Wood Jr., who did a collaboration with me for our show last week, came at me today and said something about unfolding some of the lies that I've accused him of. And so you're asking me to step away from my Trump hatred, which I've hated Trump since the mid-'80s. Can I say his policies are doing a good job? No, I can't, because I don't know what he's doing that is so good. I will say it's not as bad as it could be, but I can't think of a Trump policy that is so progressively moving us forward. I will say, if the North Carolina conversation happens with,
you mean North Korea?
I said North Carolina, didn't I? Fuck.
You sure did.
I did. Okay. I'm in North Carolina. North Carolina. If North Carolina does not secede from the nation. All right. North Korea. Yes. If the North Korea conversation, I'm tired. I'm sorry. If that breaks down if that comes together and leads to a greater level of peace in the Korean Peninsula or the Carolinian Peninsula. I took that away from you before you could get to it, you son of a bitch. If that happens, I will give him credit for that. He has done some good things. Overall, I'm not thrilled with how he's handled the presidency, but there are good things that have come from his actions. So let me give it a 50-50 at this point and say there's a lot to be determined. Is that a fair answer?
That's fair. I mean, my 2 cents is, honestly, I think we have enough data. I mean, and my argument is, I think I would have said the same thing about Barack Obama in the first 18 months of his presidency. I just think that's too soon to judge a president. You could argue, or I could argue, that 4 years may not be enough to really judge the full impact and breadth of what a president does. When you think about everything that he touches, everything that his administration touches, and how these things trickle down and play out. So the idea that we know 18 months in how these policies are affecting people, I mean, tax reform, okay, yeah, you got it implemented, and that's interesting, right? I mean, there were a few companies that gave out $1,000 bonuses, but we also know that there were a number of companies who gave out bonuses and gave out pink slips, in the same week. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a counterbalance there. And, what's the impact? Everyone's talking about the repeal of part of, of the mandate of Obamacare, but what are our insurance premiums looking like, and how did tax reform and what we gave and took away from the Affordable Care Act, what does all that mean? Where does it really come down to? Because over the next 18 months, that's when we'll start to see where our health insurance prices are. And there were things that they were doing with the tax reform and repealing this and that from the Affordable Care Act that were supposed to make things better. So over the next 18 months, are our insurance premiums going to stay the same? Are they going to go down? Are they going to go up? Or are they going to skyrocket? Like, those are all sort of things that are out there. Where are we with illegal immigration? Because whether you're on the progressive left and you're just, you're an American, but you're dead set on, people just being able to come to the country for any goddamn reason, for no reason, and no, just whatever, then
escaping horror would be the main reason.
What's that?
Escaping a horrific situation would be the main reason.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially, people. I mean, okay, we'll get there on the show. But I mean, you have the progressive left that are willing to allow people to come over and be in the country, no questions asked, no matter what, and we figure it out later. And then you have the other side who say, build a wall and everyone's got to come through one checkpoint, and that whole thing. Wherever you come out, like we haven't really done anything on that side yet, right? Like Trump says, we're building the wall, right? Like they maybe added 100 feet of wall in San Diego. We still had people coming over the border. It's that time of year where people come. It's after spring, summer, so you're seeing an influx of people come. Numbers are about where they are typically seasonally in terms of immigration. I don't think we have enough to really tell, and so that's why I think it's premature for anyone, whether you're conservative or progressive or whatever, to start to make those claims that he's a failure or he's a success or whatever. We just don't have the data yet to know.
I agree. And my come at me, bro, is much, much less political.
Good.
So, something incredible has happened in sports this year. An expansion team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, are challenging for a Stanley Cup championship. Now, you're not a hockey guy. You grew up in Youngstown. You're not a hockey guy in general. But as a sports fan, if an expansion team came into the NBA, Major League Baseball, or the NFL and was immediately challenging for a championship, does that bother you or encourage you, or something in between?
So for me, especially in hockey, I love this. I love the fact that the Golden Knights have been able to make it this far. I love the fact that they're up. I love the fact that there's a good chance that they could win. Everyone likes an underdog story to a degree, unless your team is not the underdog, which kind of happens with me and my football allegiances. But I like this idea of the team not coming in and having to suck, right? Like, if you're a new fan base and you have a new team, take Cleveland, for instance. The Cleveland
That's
Browns,
where I was going to go next. Go.
20 years ago, were an expansion team, and the league didn't like the fact that the Panthers and the Jaguars came in and within short order were vying for the Super Bowl. So when the Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns came into the league, they completely sabotaged them and said, you get the worst of these rosters. You get, guys that people don't want, guys that are overpaid, guys that have a history of injury, but we will give you the number one pick in the draft, and go. And the Texans have done a little bit better than the Browns. They've been in the playoffs a couple times, but the Browns have only been in the playoffs like once since they've been back in 1999. And now part of the Browns issue has been blunder after blunder in terms of bad decision in the front office. But at the same time, you have to wonder if you flip it around and you gave them better players to begin with, if some of those early coaches and some of the early quarterback pick and all that stuff looks a little bit better, and those teams are able to build upon a better base and not be constantly, drowning in quicksand essentially, and continuing to fail. Instead, maybe you see a team that is building towards a winning tradition and they're doing it fast. So to watch what the Golden Knights are doing right out of the gate in the Stanley Cup Finals, fuck yes, I'm all for it, and I hope that they win it. And it's also kind of a big fuck you to some of those other owners in the league, especially those Canadian teams, because Canadian hockey fans are really arrogant and they're really shitty to U.S. fans.
Dude, I'm from Buffalo. I know how annoying Montreal and Toronto fans are.
Right. So, I mean, it's got to be driving them nuts to see two American teams, and then two teams that are, one, especially seeing the Knights, but also Tampa Bay.
No, Washington.
I'm sorry. Seeing the Washington Capitals, who've never won a Stanley Cup, and then seeing, Las Vegas, who's never even been in contention, and them not being in there. And I said Tampa Bay because Washington beat Tampa Bay.
Yes.
And
Tampa was supposed to be the team. I mean, Tampa's won a
right.
cup, and they were the favorite. It's as a hockey fan, I've always hated Alex Ovechkin, who is a superstar in hockey for 15 years roughly. I hate the guy as a guy who cheered against him, but he is that superstar who's never won it all. And oddly, I find myself cheering for him just because I hope he'll win a cup and retire. But B, because, as much as he's kind of a super talented guy who's got some dirty side to his game. It's very, very few Russian players have really gotten that mantle of leadership successfully and won it. And he's been carrying that franchise's mantle for a long time. And I don't know, I've seen enough, behind the scenes stuff with him that a bit of me would be like, good for you. But I've always had a fuck you, Alex Ovechkin thing in me too. So I'm a bit torn.
So is he a good guy? Do we know?
On the ice, he's kind of a dick, but he's kind of a dick who's talented and he takes a lot of shit and he gives it back.
I mean,
off the ice, we have nothing bad we don't know anything about him really. Okay. I mean, he's certainly never had any awful off the ice, allegations or whatever.
I mean, so as far as we know, it seems like
hockey tried to do their equivalent of 30
for 30?
Not for 30 for 30. What's the
Hard
Knocks? They tried to do their version of Hard Knocks, and they interviewed his family back in Russia, and they made him look like a really good guy. And it was so weird because apparently if your name is Alex in Russian, Sasha is your nickname. So I'm hearing his mom and his dad call him Sasha, and I'm like, that's a girl's name. But if Sasha's a great guy, okay.
Sasha. There's plenty of. Sasha Baron Cohen. Sasha.
True. True. Okay. Well, Sasha, Alexis, and Sasha are Jim and James apparently, or Steve and Steven. So.
Or Dick and Richard.
Or Dick. Or Dick and Richard. All right, let's.
Well, just because the name's
that's the
because they're not the
soft name. Yeah,
it's a Dick from Richard, or I don't know how you get the Bill from
William. Yes. All right.
Or
Steven, and Jim and James are pretty easy.
Yeah.
All right, man. We've been doing this for a while. You ready to shut this down?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have any closing remarks or whatever?
No.
All right, be honest. Have you hit? You're at my place right now. Is the Blanton's gone?
No.
Okay, good.
What is your obsession?
Hey,
of the two of us, I've got the better whiskey collection.
That is true. That is absolutely true. I
don't need to drink your Blantons.
You're right. You don't. All right, man. Hey, have a good trip this weekend. I'll be back in Cleveland tomorrow. Hopefully we get to do a show face to face again soon. Always good talking to you, man. I think I enjoyed talking to you tonight. We are at Whiskey Congress on all social media. Jim or Steve at Whiskey Congress. If you want to email us, please come at us. If you have a come at me bro that you want me to throw at Steve or vice versa, please email that to us. And other than that, Steve, I will tell you that I do have my electric smoker is assembled now, so I'll break that in this weekend, and we can start talking about getting some food cooked together soon.
Oh, I wish you would have told me about that. I did some smoking this weekend over Memorial Day.
Oh, what'd you do?
I did ribs and wings. Did a couple racks of ribs, and I did a couple dozen wings, and mostly good. The wings on the lowest rack dried out and burnt. Well, not burnt; they just dried out. Everything else was perfect. Although the ribs were a little spicy.
Well, you know what? You offered to cook for me, but I had to leave town.
Yeah, whatever. You just didn't want to eat.
Oh, fuck off! Yeah, okay, victim. You know damn well that I respect your smoking skills. You've cooked for parties that I've been at a couple times. It's been great. All right, look, I'm obviously going to be the awful bad guy white person now, so let's just wrap this shit up. We did the closing stuff. Good night, brother.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good, man. Good talking to you. Bye.
Yep.